Hi, everybody. Welcome to the December 11th, 2015 edition of Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host, Dominic Duzzutti. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's get a quick take on a recent Colorado tourism survey that showed Colorado's marijuana laws have influenced decisions to vacation here close to 50% of the time. Patty Calhoun from Westward, I expected it was always going to be a little bit. You can't ignore the fact that we're only one of two states in the union. But 50% of the time, what do you think of the results?
Well, I think it's about time that the Tourism Board actually asked some questions about this that acknowledge that it has had an effect. Certainly, I have had plenty of old friends visiting and visiting dispensaries. You know, they think it's like so bizarre. It's the entertainment value much more than the product they're getting. They just think it's something to talk about. So the 50% doesn't surprise me, because if people are thinking of Colorado, they're thinking of sunshine, they're thinking of mountains, they're thinking of snow, they're thinking dispensaries, not because they want to go, but because it's all we've heard about Colorado in the national news, except for when people are shooting people.
That's a very good point. David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School, 50% saying that it influences their decision. Does that sound accurate to you? Does it sound a little bit too much, a little too little?
It seems too high, and of course, there's also people for whom it's influenced the decision and they've chosen not to go there. They would prefer to ski at, say, Alta rather than Breckenridge, because they think that's a better atmosphere for their family, for example. The shocking thing is, if you got this 49%, but only 8% say they visited a dispensary. Now, maybe they were in a group of 5 people and only one person actually went to the dispensary, but it seems surprisingly low for that. And I think it also underestimates the dramatic effect of the new triangle rebranding the Colorado state government. I would say that's probably much more important for the average American about wanting to come to Colorado.
It's a very good point. We didn't survey anybody about carbon monoxide or anything with that new logo. Eric Sonman, political analyst. Do you think any other states are seeing this as, wait a second, how are we going to bring people to Delaware or other cities that may need a little tourism boost? Do you think this may seem attractive?
Well, that's a challenge. How are we bringing people to Delaware? It may take more than that. First of all, kudos to David. I feel off my game. I haven't gone after the silly triangle in months and months. So that was well done, and I'm sure that is the major draw to Colorado these days. The 50% number strikes me as high, but who knows? And as David points out, it's a magnet. You know, there are two ends of the magnet. It draws. It also pushes some families away. I suspect it draws more than it pushes away. I think there's a novelty aspect to it. I'm not sure it's going to be year after year. We got to come to Colorado to go get high, go visit a dispensary. But I certainly know of people who they come here. It might not be the draw, but once they're here, it's when in Vegas, and you got to go check it out. I think it's interesting, and again, it's a magnet, double-edged sword, whatever you want to call it. The extent to which this has become definitional about Colorado, as Patty points out, it is front and center in terms of Colorado's national image and reputation.
Penfield Tate, attorney with QTAC Rock, wrap it up for us.
I think the number's low. I think this is exactly one of those issues people won't tell pollsters the truth about. I think that it probably influenced far more people to come visit than it did deter. I think far more people visited dispensaries than admitted to it, although I like David's theory that there were a group of 5 people, only one of them had the courage or the money to go in and visit. But I think the number's low. But I agree, this is the novelty aspect of it. And one of the things as a community, policymakers, lawmakers, municipalities, the state need to figure out is, there's a window of opportunity. For better or for worse, it's here. It's what the voters have approved. We have a taxing regulatory structure. Take advantage of it, because I think it'll plummet and fall off the cliff at some point, and then it won't be a significant impact or driver on anyone's decisions to visit, because surrounding states will have legalized recreational marijuana also.
GOP presidential candidate Donald Trump sparked new outrage this week when he proposed to ban Muslims from entering the U.S. Colorado lawmakers from both sides joined the chorus, saying that Trump's statements were out of line, with Senator Cory Gardner going so far as to call him a buffoon. Patty, we've seen nonstop international and national coverage on Trump's comments. What I'm interested in is seeing the effect it's going to have on the Republican Party and just the election. I mean, he's a phenomenon. What he says it just gets crazier and crazier. But in a purple state like Colorado, there's enough wiggle room here that something like this can make a difference. What do you think of the reaction so far?
It's been fascinating. I mean, who would have thought that Trump would be doing as well as he is now a year ago, that he would even still be in the game? You think about Sunday night when President Barack Obama, remember him? No one is talking about him now, made his speech on terrorism, and then all of a sudden the real explosion came with Trump's comments. Only Donald Trump could bring together Colorado's congressional delegation, they all agree. And not just Colorado's congressional delegation, but in fact the entire Middle East. He seems to have done the miraculous. He has them all, he has all those countries and factions agreeing. And ISIS agrees with him, which is really something. It's incredible. It is not going to die down. And for the Republican candidates, they really have to decide how to play this, because clearly it is playing well with a large percentage of Republican voters. As people are polling, his ratio is still going up. So the real thing to watch will be next week's debate on Tuesday night, and who asks what questions and where the candidates line up.
David, on the legal side of things, I'm imagining that any of Trump's proposals break a variety of parts of integral elements of our Constitution. So I don't even want to go that far of what he could actually do, but I guess, is the response also echoing whether it's an ignorance or a desire to ignore that part of the Constitution? If you see residents and citizens of the United States saying, yeah, we should do that too, thinking, wait a second, there's this whole thing called the Bill of Rights that would fly in the face of. Is it saying a lot about citizens seeing the reaction here?
Well, the power to exclude foreigners from coming into the country is close to absolute, and the legal scholars who've written about this said it's a bad idea, probably legal as applied to foreigners. When he says American citizens who are Muslims who are overseas on vacation and then return home, we're not going to let them do that. Of course, that's plainly unconstitutional. In his 1987 book, The Art of the Deal, he talks about the use of hyperbole to generate earned media. So there's no reason to think that he particularly takes this idea any more seriously than all the other stuff he keeps throwing out, or that it'll be his idea 2 weeks from now. At one point, he said we should stay out of Syria and just let the Russians take care of it. And then at the next debate, we should bomb the expletive out of Syria. His positions are ever shifting, and as Patty said, draw earned media, and quite conveniently, from Mrs. Clinton's point of view, for whom I think he may well be part of the deep conspiracy, because when he does this, he draws attention away from the failure of the Obama-Clinton foreign policy as exemplified by the president's pathetic speech on Sunday. We are living in days in some ways similar to the final days of the old Roman Republic. Both parties have front-runners who are quasi-fascist. And I don't mean like Hitler. I mean like Mussolini. He's the founding father of modern fascism. They're running against the First Amendment. Hillary Clinton said her litmus test for who gets on the Supreme Court is to overturn the decision which said you can't criminalize putting out a movie about Hillary Clinton. Trump says, when Rich Lowry of National Review calls Trump an ass on television, that the FCC should punish Lowry for saying so. They are both contemptuous of the Constitution, as fascism essentially is. They both promise massive strongman rule. Hillary's promises of what she's going to do by executive action go far beyond the many lawless actions of the Obama administration. She's going to double and triple down on that. And meanwhile, Trump yesterday said he's going to sign an executive order for an automatic death penalty for anybody who kills a police officer, which of course is something you could do if you're Juan Domingo Perón in Argentina in 1955, but you cannot do in a constitutional republic. So both front runners are enemies of the republic, and they are frontrunners because they've been allowed to be that, not just by the low-information voters, but by well-informed voters who are shockingly lining up behind these people.
Eric, I'm not sure if you had either Mussolini or Perón in your pool today of historical references, but if you did, first of all, congratulations. But let's bring it back here to a local level. If you're thinking about running for U.S. Senate here in Colorado, if you're Mike Kaufman and you're running in Congress, this is something that is going to affect the Republican Party, and you're probably going to be in a very tight race where a couple of percentage points could very well change the results. Are you worried about this? Are you trying to inoculate yourself? What do you do to react?
Every Republican, whether it's local, Colorado-based, or around the country, is perplexed and incredibly worried about this and somewhat paralyzed in terms of how to respond. You're in a bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. All the focus last September was on the pledge Trump took not to run as a third-party candidate. Well, let's not forget, all these other people also took pledges to support the nominee of the party. And as Trump has become more irresponsible, unserious, outrageous, buffoon-like, whatever word, and we could go on, you want to use, all of those people, and down to the local level, the Mike Kaufmans of the world, are being conflicted of how long, how do I keep my distance from this guy? Ultimately, how do I, if he should go and become a prospective nominee, how do I handle it then, et cetera. So they're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. I have no idea if Trump is seriously considering a third-party run. I think that is well down the road. Right now he's running for the Republican nomination, and he seems to be prospering there, although albeit we haven't had a single voter actually speak up in Iowa, New Hampshire, or any place else yet, and that's still 45 or more days away. If he goes for a third-party nomination, he makes the impact that Ralph Nader had back in 2000 look minimal. Let's not forget that most people think Ralph Nader cost Al Gore the White House, but Trump would be a much more potent candidate, and it's hard to imagine any scenario other than that secures the election of the Democrat, presumably Hillary Clinton. I mean, David and Patty have said it, I'll be brief, but the irresponsibility, or I'll use a different word, the demagoguery of what Donald Trump is doing is shocking. It is reprehensible. I thought one of the stand-up moments of the week was Speaker Paul Ryan, and he had the best soundbite, 4 words: "This is not conservatism." Whether you come at this from a conservative point of view or a liberal point of view, this is fundamentally un-American. I happen to think it might preclude Donald Trump from ever taking the oath of office, because part of taking the oath is pledging to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And this is as blatantly unconstitutional as anything we've seen. Lastly, people need to start calling Ted Cruz to account for the little wink and nod game he's playing of not endorsing what Trump is saying, but winking and nodding at Trump's supporters that I'm really one of you, and when he implodes, I'm your guy.
Penn, we talked a lot about how Republicans are trying to respond and the trouble they're in. Are Democrats sitting back and smiling and enjoying the whole thing?
They may be, but I would tell them that that's a dangerous game to play. Donald Trump has come to exemplify the old maxim that truth is stranger than fiction. You can't make this junk up, some of the stuff he's saying and doing. But I think the problem is more serious than just Donald Trump saying outrageous stuff. And I agree with David. I think he says it for effect. I think he's a charlatan. I'm not convinced he believes half of what he says, but so long as he gets positive reinforcement by 35% of Republican primary voters, and mark my words, there are more people who agree with him than that. They're just afraid to admit it in public because they see how ridiculous and how scary and offensive he sounds. But what I think he's come to represent is, and it happens on both the left and the right, there is an absence of civility, moderation, and desire to work together. This is simply a ratcheting up of some of the brinksmanship and extremity. Well, you don't like what I agree? Well, I'm going to shut down the government for 90 days. We've seen this escalate over a period of time. And it's having some other effects. I mean, I think part of why Carson is fading is because he started saying extreme stuff, thinking, well, if Trump can do it, I can do it. Well, it shows, no, you can't. You can't get away with it. I wrote down Ted Cruz before Eric said it because Cruz is doing, in my mind, the exact same thing, except he is being more subtle about it. I think he probably is as extreme as Donald Trump speaks, but he's playing this game of trying to stay out of the public light and out of the press and not disavow Trump and not agree with him, but just sort of hang back and lay in the weeds and say, when the time comes, I'll be your guy and I'll do all the stuff he says. I'm just not dumb enough to say it publicly and potentially not get the nomination. So we all ought to watch this, but I think this is a disturbing trend. You've got, and I think Democratic candidates are going to start to do this more and more, make extreme statements to appeal to sort of the basis instinct of people, which drives us all further apart rather than bringing us together. And at the end of the day, by the time we get through a general election, I don't know how the next president is going to govern in light of the environment that's being created now, given already the disconnect between Congress and the president. This is spooky.
Mm-hmm. The accused shooter of the November attack at a Colorado Springs Planned Parenthood appeared in court on Wednesday. In a series of sporadic outbursts, the accused shooter admitted his own guilt, declaring, "I am guilty, there will be no trial, I'm a warrior for the babies." David, there was a little bit of doubt of exactly if this was, if abortion was a major instigator in the idea of the defendant's mind. So that part is clear. Now we're back to the whole mental health discussion and probably a dramatic trial if it goes that far. From what you've seen on your side of things, again with your legal background, are we going to see another circus-like trial?
Hopefully not. When you're, say, a court-appointed lawyer who's representing an indigent person who has mental illness, and the case is, should this person be involuntarily committed for treatment, what lawyers in that situation are told by the professional ethics boards and things like that is, you may correctly think your client would be better off going to that mental hospital for a month and getting better, but if the client wants you to keep him out, then your job is to represent the client's wishes. Well, now we have the same thing here. The perpetrator almost certainly has some mental illnesses, personality disorders, among others, but that doesn't mean he's incompetent to know what's going on and to know what he wants. And if he wants to plead guilty, and if he wants to plead guilty to a capital crime, that's his choice. And it's contrary to sort of the mentality of the public defender's office, which is you always want to minimize what happens to your clients. But as an attorney, you have at some point an ethical obligation to follow your client's wishes. And if your client wants to plead guilty, you can't try to throw sand in the gears and stop him from doing it. Maybe there will be a mental health evaluation, but based on what little we've seen so far, the criminal here has enough mental competence to make that decision to plead guilty in a knowing and informed way.
Eric, it wasn't like this situation was not already ratcheting up the conversation about pro-life and pro-choice in a very sensitive time. But this seems to only turn up that heat a little bit. Do you think this is going to have ramifications next year?
The pro-life, pro-choice debate, yes, the heat got turned up. It was turned up over the summer with the videos. It was obviously ratcheted up with the tragic shooting in Colorado Springs. But it's not like that debate ever really recedes. It's the divide that has cleaved this country for 40-some years now. And it's a divide that you don't see any end in sight or any way to even sort of limit the debate and move it away from the margins and say, yeah, we're going to disagree, but we're going to disagree on a narrower set of issues and put the zealots on both sides a little bit in their place. You just don't see that happening. The news clips I saw of the preliminary hearing in Colorado Springs, I mean, if I've seen the look of crazy, that was the look of that was the look of crazy. Now, obviously, you could say the same thing about James Holmes, the irony of them having the same public defender, Dan King, who has one of the tougher jobs in this state. I have no idea how this ends up. I'm sitting between two attorneys, and I should probably let them have most of the airtime here. To be curious to see whether District Attorney Dan May seeks the death penalty down there. Yes, Colorado Springs and the 4th Judicial District is a very conservative part of the state, but again, this guy is, how old is Robert Deere? In his upper 50s. Even if you secure a death penalty, which I think is a tough judgment to get in this day and age, even in Colorado Springs, is he ever going to lie in a gurney with needles in him? Color me very doubtful.
Penn, from what you saw so far, both from your own perspective and a legal perspective, what do you think?
Legally, and David touched on many of these points, what a lot of folks don't realize is two things. You can go into any county court or district court any day of the week, and there are a whole bunch of people who walk in the door accused of offense, and they'll look at the judge and say, yeah, I did it, I'm guilty. I'm going to pay a fine, or if I have to do 30 days suspended, I'm guilty, I'm a criminal. Let me deal with it. His actions were heinous, they're reprehensible, and I saw some of the clips of him on TV. I'm not convinced that he's not competent to stand trial. The other thing that's interesting is under Colorado law, after you go through a certain process, he can fire his public defenders and plead guilty and tell the court, I am guilty. I don't want a trial. I don't want to go through this. I'm guilty. Let's get on to the sentencing phase. Now, I do think if the DA pushes for the death penalty, that changes the game. But if the DA is willing to accept life in prison without any help of parole with somebody who's 57, 58, this looks like a guy he's already said it in open court now. I don't know how they deal with that piece, but he may just say, I'm guilty. I did it. I think I did it because of my religious or whatever personal convictions. I'm prepared now to go to jail for the rest of my life. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Patty, do you think we'll be spared a messy trial?
I hope so. I mean, first of all, at least we will be spared, I hope, from now on, the suggestion that pot did it, which was really until he went to court that day, there was a big story in the Post, oh, he came here for the pot. No one who is smoking pot is going to take on this kind of action. I mean, it takes a lot more get up and go. This guy, he looks crazy, but he could be just a true zealot, a true believer. I mean, he clearly made his motivation is clear. He said he did it because he did it for the babies. He's against abortion. Is that crazy, or is it just someone who truly believes? I think if he wants to plead guilty, let him plead guilty, let him serve life in prison, which we all wish had come down, not we all, but I certainly wish, had just happened earlier on with James Holmes. Take a plea, lock him up forever, and avoid the trial. I cannot even imagine this trial would be just as horrible as the James Holmes trial, making everyone live through what they went through that day. So I think letting him plead guilty is a greater good.
Well, we're in a chatty mood today, so we're going to go right to Disgrace of the Week, our favorite part of the show. And as always, Patty, start us off.
I am going to start off with Denver City Council, which is considering this sweetheart deal for REI on a parking garage. We all remember what that part of town was like back when REI took over the old Forney, but now $500,000 for a parking garage looks like a great deal. I want to thank Rafael Espinoza, who's taken some hits at this table, for actually scrutinizing that measure, postponing the vote. They'll talk about it again Monday night.
David.
As Senator Kent Lambert brought out in the Joint Budget Committee hearings this week, this $3 million a year of Hollywood welfare for the film industry, the governor's office spent $5 million spread over several years just for Quentin Tarantino, a guy who's worth himself $100 million, supposedly because this is going to help brand the state. Quentin Tarantino's movie is called The Hateful Eight, and it is, as I haven't seen it, but if it's typical Quentin Tarantino, it'll be nihilistic violence porn. And on top of that, the movie, according to the Wikipedia page for it, is set in Wyoming. So we're not even going to brand the state with hateful violence porn. We could have spent $5 million on anything else better than on Quentin Tarantino.
Eric.
Good for both of them. Per today's news story, the head of the ACLU in Colorado Springs, a person named Lauren Werble, if I have the pronunciation straight, I always associate the ACLU with the ardent defenders of free speech. And yet he, on his social media, even though he's now denying it in a fairly inept, incompetent, and not truthful way, no matter what you think of Donald Trump and no matter what all of us said about his demagoguery and unseriousness and go on, he was basically suggesting that Trump supporters should be killed. It's a little rich, and it's rich for anyone in this country. It goes to what Penn said in terms of just how divided we are, but it's particularly rich coming from the head of the local ACLU.
Penn.
It's the general political debate around this presidential election. We are descending to a level which I don't think we've ever seen before. We all need to sort of slap ourselves awake and shake this, or we're going to be in a world of hurt.
Say something nice about somebody, Patty?
I want to talk about a group that I didn't know about until we wrote about them this week. The Colorado Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. When you have all the shouting that's going on, this is 11 different religions affiliated to just talk to people and talk about the choices before them and to have rational civic conversation. So, great organization.
Civic conversation. That's
Very
becoming
rare,
more, yeah.
but possible.
Indeed. David?
The guy who probably for the last 30 years in the state has had more public civic conversations than anyone else. Mike Rosen is retiring from 3 great decades at KOA. He was certainly a strong conservative, but his style was always factual, logical. He did tons of research outside of the time he was on the air, and he improved the state in a really positive way, among other ways by showing a constructive way that let's talk about the important issues, let's have our point of view, and let's make our arguments with facts and logic.
Eric?
I'll second David's. Mike Rosen has been an important voice in the state. I haven't always agreed with them, but he's been thoughtful. He's avoided a lot of the bombast of a lot of people in that talk radio medium, and he's earned a new chapter in his life, but good for him. Let me just add one there. I think you have to say something about Tony Lopez Jr., the officer who was so critically wounded up on 37th and Federal a few days ago. Fortunately, he looks like he's winning his battle for his life, and we wish him and his family the best.
Penn?
Officer Lopez, certainly, but the people of the state of Colorado, First Bank, and the Community First Foundation, the 6th year of Colorado Gives Day, we have, as a community, gave $28.4 million to 1,884 nonprofits. Over the last 6 years, $111 million donated to charity. When we come together, we can get a lot of things right.
You're absolutely right. That is all the time we have tonight. Thanks for tuning in. On behalf of everyone here at Channel 12, I want to echo what Ben just said. I want to thank all of you who helped make our Colorado Gives Day here at Channel 12 a huge success. Also join us on Wednesday, December 16th at 7 p.m. for the premiere of Fremente de la Vita, Jefferson Rubin, chronicling the short yet prolific career of the Colorado sculptor, produced right here by our own Joshua Hassel. For everyone here at Channel 12, I'm Dominic Dizzuti. Thanks very much for watching. Good night.
Hi, I'm Larry, audio guru and time machine producer for Colorado Inside Out. Today I'm in my role as audio guy. I've just received the lineup for today's episode of Colorado Inside Out. And the first thing I'm going to do here is actually make sure all my microphones are working.
Besides, if you're into a bar, talk to mic.
Got 5 microphones working here, and as you could probably hear in the background, we hear background chatter and all of those things. The next thing I'm going to do here, this mixer we have, digital console, actually has the ability to remember the different participants in our shows on there. So what I'm going to do now is go in and find here in the list all the people that will be participating in today's show. David Kopel, Patricia Calhoun, the queen of the show, the actual true star of the show, Dominic, the new and engaging host taking over from the popular Raj Chauhan. And now all those people's voices, the tunings that I've created for those individuals have been entered into the board, and I've got them to where they'll sound at their absolute best when the show starts. If you watch the shows here, you'll note that the microphones are typically on the side facing the host if someone's on a lapel. That's so when they turn to Dominic, there's a mic between them and Dominic. If they turn the other way, he'd be gone. If I put the mic over here and he's talking at Dominic, we don't really hear him. If I have the chance and someone's wearing a tie and I expect they're going to be turning to both ways in the audience, we'll try and place it on the tie. If you see that, somebody on the tie, it was because it was either really convenient and easy to hang it on their tie, or because we expected they'd be having to turn both ways to address different panelists. And so that ensures that we pick them up. The next step in the process is to go get a cup of coffee and talk to Dominic.
Hey, Simon, how are you? Well, it's good to see you. We're having our usual Friday cup of coffee, and it's always, as always, it's a kind of Larry and Dominic tradition, if you will. It's some of Columbia's finest, if you will, but it's what makes CIO what it is. It's something where everyone has to be on their toes. That's there's nothing there.
It's all about the beans, man.
It's always been about the beans. You ever want to know what the secret is behind Car Inside is? Good coffee.
I'd like to thank my agent and to all the members of the Academy for making this possible.
Welcome to the December 11, 2015 Colorado Inside Out post-game, a special web-exclusive production here on Channel 12. It's going to be a doozy, trust me. Let's get a quick take on the Colorado Supreme Court hearing arguments this week regarding the rights of cities to ban fracking in Colorado. The cases stem from bans passed in Longmont and in Fort Collins and will likely have a major effect on the 2016 statewide ballot. Patty Calhoun from Westward, this topic would have been on the ballot in 2014, except for a kind of a last-minute deal that John Hickenlooper helped to put together. This is probably going to be there again, except if we get some sort of other decision from the Supreme Court. Do you think this might stop ballot issues coming in 2016? What do you think?
No, I don't think it's going to stop ballot issues, because if the environmentalists, for example, the ones who are pushing the anti-fracking ballot measures, if they agree with the court, maybe the oil and gas industry will push something else. I mean, we already have seen just how hard it is even to get consensus with the commission, the oil and gas group that is considering this issue that Hickenlooper put together. They're supposed to issue a report. Their final meeting is in January, and they are as fractious as everybody is over fracking. So we'll see if the Supreme Court, the Colorado Supreme Court, comes down with any decision that makes everyone happy, but I am sure we will have this on the ballot in 2016. There's not going to be the last-second Jared Polis compromise.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. Is this just one more chapter in the long book of war over fracking in Colorado?
Well, the war on science, more precisely. But I predict the Supreme Court will rule in favor of the state and against these local bans. Because this is something that is minutely and comprehensively regulated at the state level, and by precedent, that makes it preemptive. So what the state says, you can do it when you do it in this very particular way. A county can't come in, or a city, and say you can't do it at all. The best argument the cities have is, it's not good enough, is there was a case that said, well, I think it was La Plata County, you're going to drill according to the rules about how the state says you should do it, but in La Plata County, fine, go ahead and do that, but you have to get a permit from us too. And the court said that's okay, because, well, you're still going to be doing what the state said. You know, that level of just ask for a permit for what you're allowed to do is okay. But this isn't ask for a permit, this is a prohibition. It's a 5-year moratorium, as in moratorium from death, can't do it at all. And the fallback argument for Longmont and other cities is, well, we're not banning oil extraction entirely. We're just saying you can't do it in a certain way, and you can do it you can do it in another way, which is sort of like saying, well, we're not banning skiing in the area because you can still use barrel staves. If you want to use the obsolete technology, that's all right with us. And I think that's not going to, as a practical matter, succeed in the Colorado Supreme Court.
Eric Sonneman, political analyst, what effect do you think this will have on at least the near term with the election coming up?
Clearly, at some point in time, we're headed for a battle royale in this state with the ultimate ballot issue fight. The money that will get spent on this is unbelievable. Makes me wish I was maybe in my own line of work, because there is money to be made, shall we say. Whether that is 2016 or 2018, I'm not yet sure. I think there's the court factor that we're talking about here. There are other political factors. I think the biggest factor might be the economic factor, which is the price. The price per barrel of gas and oil is way down, and so you don't have quite the intensity. The issue is still hot, but I don't perceive it as quite as hot as it was 18 or 24 months ago leading up to the 2014 cycle. So whether it happens this time or not, maybe David or Penn here, as the lawyers at the table, can talk about the timeline of this decision, but my surmise is if oral arguments were heard by the Supreme Court in early December, you're probably looking at a decision in April, May, somewhere in that approximate timeline. You're getting pretty late if it's an adverse decision in terms of the fractivists point of view. If it's an adverse decision to them, you're getting pretty late in that ballot setting title to go get your language, to go get your signatures and everything else. Now, whether they jump the gun on that and are doing it anyway remains to be seen. And they also have to figure out where their funding is coming from, because I don't think the bank of Jared Polis is going to be as open to them this time as it may have been in 2014.
Penfield Tate, attorney with QTAC Rock, also a longtime state lawmaker. What do you think we're going to see after the decision comes down? Is this, again, just going to set off more fighting? Because we're used to seeing the Supreme Court, whether in Colorado or the U.S. Supreme Court, bring some finality to arguments. This seems that there may not be a chance at some finality here.
Well, the problem is in Colorado, where you have easy access to get a constitutional or statutory amendment on the ballot, the court decision is going to be the beginning of the next strategy to be deployed in this battle. The other thing that's not discussed is, in addition to this court case and the fact that the justices now have to consider this, we've already got the battle playing out on TV. I mean, you see TV commercials with scared kids. You see TV commercials primarily with women walking by babbling brooks talking about, I love the environment and I believe in fracking and oil. So the war for the minds and opinions of Coloradans has never stopped. The court decision is simply going to prompt a series of ballot measures, because the loser of the court decision is not going to accept that. So we're going to have a bunch of ballot measures, which is typically the worst place to get this figured out. The best place to resolve it is in the legislature. Let everybody have a battle royale, show up and testify, but this really ought to be done at a state level. And I'm not even saying cities and local communities shouldn't have a right to have some say in this. But this impacts the entire state, because what you can't do in one place gets pushed someplace else. So every decision, in either directly or indirectly, affects someone else. This is not going to be resolved until we potentially go through 2 or 3 rounds of ballot initiatives, and it's going to be who runs out of money and energy first, quite frankly.
Well, it's a good time to be a political consultant sometime. I agree with you there, Eric. That is all the time we have for Colorado Inside Out postgame this week. Leave us a comment and tell us what you think. For everyone here at CPT12.org, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching.